Welcome to this explainer. I am so incredibly excited to have you here today because, well, we are embarking on a truly massive journey. We're going to trace the very story of us and the life around us by looking at how the evidence itself has changed over time. We'll start literally in the dirt with tangible, heavy physical fossils and ancient stone tools. From there, we'll zoom all the way down to the microscopic, totally invisible code of human DNA. And finally, we'll step back to look at the very nature of scientific truth itself. It's a fascinating look at not just what we know, but exactly how we know it.
It really all begins with this deeply provocative question. When you read a headline that says, scientists prove X, or researchers discover Y about our ancestors, how do we actually know where we came from? And maybe more importantly, how much of that so-called knowledge can we really trust? Today, our central theme is investigating not just human and animal history, but putting the reliability of the scientific method itself to the test. We're putting human history and human methodology under the exact same microscope. So, here is our roadmap for today. We'll kick things off with sparks and stones, move right into the blueprint of us, and then explore avian evolution in Taking to the Skies. After that, we'll tackle the crisis of reproducibility in modern research, and we'll wrap the whole thing up with the evolution of science. All right, let's dive into Section 1, Sparks and Stones, the Physical Dawn of Human Technology. When we look at the physical evidence of our ancestors, it is definitely not an overnight success story. Relying on the Smithsonian's extensive research into the tangible remnants of early hominid behavior, we can really start to see the staggering scale of our history. 2.6 million years ago, Oldowan's stone tools appear. These were incredibly basic, essentially just stones bashed together to make a sharp edge. It took almost another million years, fast forward to 1.76 million years ago, for hominids to develop Acheulean hand axes, which were carefully shaped and symmetrical. And then, around 1 million years ago, we see the earliest widespread evidence of controlled fire. This unbelievably slow transition from simply striking stones to actually mastering a wild natural element like fire is the absolute foundational evidence of our cognitive evolution. What's so absolutely vital here is how these sequential steps fundamentally altered our evolutionary trajectory. It wasn't just about having, cooler tools to play with. First, striking stones to create sharp-edged flakes meant our ancestors could process meat and marrow that was previously completely inaccessible to them. Second, utilizing controlled fire offered warmth and warded off predators. This radically changed socialization because suddenly hominids could gather around a hearth after dark. But the third step? That is the absolute game changer. Cooking food. Cooking actually breaks down complex carbohydrates and proteins, effectively pre-digesting the food for us. This unlocked a massive surplus of calories, and those exact calories were redirected to fuel significant, rapid brain development. Our physical tools literally reshaped our biology. Moving right along to Section 2, the blueprint of us, where we'll be zooming way in on the microscopic code. 3 billion. That is the awe-inspiring approximate number of base pairs in the DNA of Homo sapiens, according to the landmark publication in the journal Nature that outlined the human genome sequence. 3 billion lines of biological code packed into the nucleus of almost every single cell in your body. When we moved from paleontology to genomics, our entire definition of evidence shifted from heavy things we could hold in our hands to massive data sets we literally needed supercomputers to read. And these figures actively challenged a lot of our previous assumptions. While we do have roughly 3 billion base pairs, researchers found only about 20,000 to 25,000 protein-coding genes. Now, to put that into perspective, before the genome was mapped, scientists estimated humans might have up to 100,000 genes to account for our crazy complexity. But it turns out, we have roughly the exact same number of genes as a tiny roundworm. No way, right? It just shows it's not the sheer number of genes, but how those genes are actually regulated and interact that makes us complex. Furthermore, this data proved the profound genetic similarity across our entire species. Down at the microscopic level, the evidence demonstrates the fundamental, undeniable unity of all humans. Which brings us to Section 3, Taking to the Skies, looking closely at avian evolution. When we look at broader evolution, we absolutely have to talk about theropods. This is a dinosaur suborder characterized by hollow bones and three-toed limbs. According to extensive research published by the Royal Society, these creatures are now definitively understood by paleontology to be the direct ancestors of modern birds. That means those massive, terrifying, earth-bound dinosaurs you see in museums, they didn't all just vanish.
An entire branch of them are directly linked to the pigeons and sparrows you see outside your window right now. The anatomical transformations required for flight are just dramatic. Ancestral theropods had heavy, bony tails for balance, heavy toothed jaws, and grasping hands. But over millions of years, the descendants of these creatures evolved into modern birds. They developed feathered wings, incredibly lightweight toothless beaks, and fused skeletons to withstand the intense physical demands of flight. They literally dropped the dead weight of their past to completely master a new domain. Because evolution isn't just about what survived, it's about how species adapt their physical traits to conquer entirely new environments. These astonishing skeletal changes from a heavy theropod to a lightweight bird represent millions of years of rigorous environmental testing. The environment was the crucible, and only the most aerodynamic mutations were allowed to take to the skies.
All right, shifting gears entirely for Section 4, the crisis of reproducibility, testing our modern scientific claims.
Think about it. We really trust the physical evidence of stones and bones. You can hold an Acheulean hand axe in your hand. It's real. But how reliable are modern, highly abstract studies in fields like psychology? When modern science utilizes surveys, statistical models, and complex behavioral data, the evidence isn't exactly something you can go dig up out of the dirt. It's highly abstract. And recently, scientists decided to really test how sturdy that abstract evidence was. In a massive collaborative effort published in the journal Science, researchers attempted to replicate 100 published psychology studies to see if they could get the exact same results as the original authors. The findings were, quite frankly, absolutely shocking. Only 39% of those studies were successfully replicated. A staggering 61% failed to replicate. Let that sink in. More than half of these established, peer-reviewed, published scientific studies did not yield the same results when tested a second time by independent researchers. Now, while a 61% failure rate might sound like an absolute disaster, it's actually an incredibly important milestone for us. First off, it highlights the vulnerability of complex statistical research. Human behavior is messy, and our initial models just weren't as foolproof as we thought they were. Second, it clearly shows the public that published does not automatically mean proven. A single study is really just a stepping stone, not the final word. But most importantly, it heavily emphasizes the need for rigorous self-correction in modern science. Finding out that 61% of studies failed to replicate isn't the death of psychology. It is the scientific method working exactly as it should, filtering out the errors and demanding much higher standards of evidence. And that leads us perfectly into our final stop, Section 5, the evolution of science, how we correct ourselves. We have to remember that science is not a fixed set of facts. It's a rigorous, ongoing process of testing, failing, and refining what we think we know. Just as early hominids chipped away at stones until they had a perfectly symmetrical hand axe, modern scientists are constantly chipping away at data, studies, and theories. The philosophical evolution of scientific peer review is really just another mechanism to help us survive in an environment heavily populated by misinformation and our own cognitive biases. Just look at the sheer scale of how far we have come and how we gather evidence. We started out by finding physical stones in the dirt to understand our ancient history. Then, we advanced to the point of mapping a completely invisible 3 billion character blueprint of human DNA just to understand our fundamental unity. And now we are at a stage where we are running massive meta-analyses to mathematically check our own cognitive biases. Our methods of finding the truth have matured and evolved just as much as our physical bodies have. I want to leave you with this final, highly provocative thought to ponder. If our science, our tools, and our methods of checking evidence are always evolving, what so-called facts of today will we rewrite tomorrow? The quest for understanding never truly ends. It just gets sharper. So stay curious, stay appropriately skeptical, and always keep asking questions about the evidence in front of you. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I absolutely cannot wait to explore the next fascinating topic with you soon.